So on the one hand, I feel like every time I come back, I'm given the opportunity to speak, and I feel much older. Last time I was here, I just graduated college, and now suddenly I'm getting married. And yet, I'm not growing because the table seems to get bigger every time. So please excuse me if you can't see my face. I'm just behind here. Thank you for welcoming Sophia and I, for dancing with us, for blessing us, and Mazal Tov to Chana Malka on her beautiful name. And thank you to the family for sharing your special day with us as well. In late July, the Webb Space Telescope observed what appeared to be a giant question mark far away, light years away, in outer space. Upon closer examination, though, it was really just two stars forming whose gaseous outer rings looked like a question mark from far away. The New York Times columnist who published the report concluded the following: "You are free to consider that question mark as alien graffiti, a comment on both their and our relation to our very existence. Point being, though, we've barely begun to know anything, and that's why we build telescopes. It is the human condition, I think, to seek greater understanding and insight into the very nature of the world and our place in it. Indeed, it was the Enlightenment philosopher Descartes who famously reflected on what made him human. I think, therefore I am. Without the constant prodding of the deepest ontological questions in the back of our minds, where would we be as a civilization? Would we have ever sailed across the sea, catapulted ourselves into the cosmos, dived into the depths of the unknown? Would Adam and Eve ever have ventured far outside of Eden? Abraham made a pilgrimage to his promised land. The refugees of exile returned and rebuilt a Jewish nation state, were it not for this intrinsic human sense of adventure and curiosity for what we humans can accomplish." The big question mark. As I encounter transition after transition in my life, where I study, where I live, and getting married, to just name a few small ones, I face these fundamental questions of human existence, my own question marks in the sky. Who am I? Who do I want to be? Why am I even here? These questions, though they are temporally matters of today, are questions humans have asked themselves for thousands of years. And I think it's these questions that I find simmering beneath the surface of this week's Torah portion, Ki Tavo. Like Rabbi Roisman mentioned, in the opening paragraphs of our reading, Moses prescribes the following ritual. When the Israelites enter Canaan, and only when they settle in it, meaning 17 years later, according to the Bible, they are to bring the first fruits of their harvest to the priest. The Israelites are then instructed to recount the entire story of how they and their ancestors arrived in Israel, from Jacob to the very, very present. It's striking to me that in a largely agrarian society, the hard labor of the winter and spring seasons is not first awarded to the landowner who wishes to, literally, reap the fruits of his labor. On the contrary, not only is he prohibited from even deriving any benefit from it, he is commanded to journey all the way to Jerusalem and offer them to a being who is neither easily seen nor heard. It would be as if a child, after a hard month's work in the house, takes his allowance to the candy store, buys a variety pack of candy, only to give every first Hershey, Snickers, and Milky Way away. Or maybe even more relatable, as I am in the process of adulting, it's as if when you receive a paycheck, you put 20% away in a different account to pay your taxes. No one likes that. And yet, perhaps, it is this kind of humility that the Torah is actually trying to teach us. At the very core of the ritual Moses prescribes is a recognition that we aren't given first dibs on anything. Because at the end of the day, there is only one to give credit to, and that is the Holy One. Sophia and I were actually sitting with our college professor last week, and he humbly shared that there were many in his field who had not had as a successful career as him. Yet, many were smarter and more talented than he. His success was, in some part, he said, due to luck and divine providence. And so imagine the discipline it would take if, as a farmer in antiquity, you couldn't just pick an apple off a tree and eat it. Instead, you had to set it aside, prohibited from touching it until you even brought it all the way to Jerusalem. We live in an age where we purchase produce at Publix without necessarily thinking of the people who picked it. Or we order from Amazon without much thought for the people whose hands have handled the package headed for our doorstep. This is not to shame anyone, certainly not. We are not at fault. So much distracts us from what is truly meaningful in our lives. And this I'm only starting to learn. Constant notifications on our phones, long commutes to work, economic stress, turbulent politics, these are but a few of the important, attention-grabbing influences that inundate our minds and that draw our attention away from the things that really matter, those question marks in the sky. Who am I? Who do I want to be? Why am I here? I catch myself thinking after a summer of work with teenagers, Jewish teenagers across the U.S., what is going to make Judaism compelling for the next generation of people? People who are maybe not so engaged with traditional Judaism or haven't been to Hebrew school, maybe haven't had a bar mitzvah in their whole lives, or maybe haven't had an aliyah to the Torah in a while. And I catch myself coming back to the same idea, that perhaps it is from this seed that a renewed, relevant, and compelling commitment and covenant can be made between us and Judaism. One that is built and that recognizes that Judaism can cultivate within us a sense of mindfulness, to focus on those big question marks, to focus on the small things as well, the food we eat, the way we speak, the months going by, and the seasons changing. At the core of our Torah portion today, and indeed much of Jewish tradition, is the idea that even the most minute of things matter. The way we act matters. The way we do business matters. The way we speak to others matters. The way we treat those less fortunate than us matters. The way we treat animals matters. The way we conduct ourselves behind closed doors matters. The way we carry out justice matters. It was yesterday at the dinner table that we were reflecting a story from maybe around 10 years ago of a kosher butcher somewhere in the Midwest of America who produced kosher meat, a guy with a nice beard, dressed in a nice black suit, but he mistreated his workers, didn't pay their wages, and threatened to report them to the authorities for being undocumented. That's not what the Torah wants of us. The Torah doesn't want us to eat kosher food and then mistreat the laborer who put in work to make it. The Torah doesn't want us to turn a blind eye to those who are less fortunate than us in our communities. We are asked to attune ourselves to the biggest and brightest question marks, whether they are vivid in the heavens, as seen through one of the most advanced telescopes, or the ones that are invisible, ruminating, lingering questions in our hearts. Who am I? Why am I here? And what kind of a person do I want to be? The most fundamental of these questions, I think, can be answered by and large in the house of God. Here, there is no escaping who you are as a person. Here, only you and God know your deepest secrets. And perhaps, maybe that's why people you read all over the news flee from religion today. Because when you walk into the house of God, people are confronted with their own mortality and their morality. As we were landing in Fort Lauderdale on Sunday, Sophia turned to me and asked one of these fundamental question marks in our lives. Do you ever think about whether it's right to bring children into such a fractured world? I thought for a second, the answer slowly appearing in the question itself. I told her, if you think the world is broken enough to even ask your question, then someone has to save it. Who knows if it won't be our children? This is the Torah that we have to teach our young people. The way that Judaism not only makes their lives better, but enables them to make our world better. In this week's Torah portion on page 1149 in the Eitz Chaim, Moses says, if you obey the Lord your God to observe faithfully all his commandments, Asher anochi metzavcha hayom, that I teach you on this day. And Rashi, the medieval commentator, asks on this verse, living in the 11th or 10th or 11th century, no, 11th or 12th century, I can't remember. He says, why does Moses say, Hayom, today I teach you? We've literally been sitting in shul for I don't know how many months, and we've been listening to Moses give us commandments. Why today? And Rashi says, the key is that every day there is an opportunity to realign our hearts, to redevote ourselves to a commitment to Judaism, and to say, today is the day that I'm going to start acting differently. And that's the message that we can take into this world, that it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter if you've wandered 40 years in the desert and still haven't found your home. Today is the day that matters. Tomorrow matters. And you can make a renewed commitment starting right now to teaching a Torah that will be compelling and relevant, and to living Judaism in a way that will make you more meaningful of these existential questions. This month of Elul, 2 weeks out from Rosh Hashanah, the world's fate hangs in the balance. It was the 7th Chabad Rebbe, Menachem Mendel Schneerson, who taught that there is a perpetual battle between good and evil. But even one good deed, one small good deed, could tip the balance towards good. My prayer is that we can be more mindful of the way that we exist in the world, and that Judaism and Jewish practice can be a vehicle for you and for your friends and for your family and for your children to understand your place in this world and find the ways that you can make good in it today. May this Torah reading and this season of introspection be the catalyst that we need to tip the scales of the world's fate towards good. And May we enable ourselves, whether through Jewish practice, listening to the Torah reading, coming to shul, doing one small thing, one small mitzvah, hone in on the deepest question marks in our lives, even if we need a telescope to see them. Shabbat Shalom.